This is a production of Cornell University.
Okay, welcome everyone. If you could find your seats, we're going to get started. My name is Larry Smart. I am a professor in the horticulture section in the School of Integrated Plant Science. And I want to welcome you again to our 2025 Grain Fiber Hemp Field Day. I think we have a great lineup today, starting here at the auditorium. We're going to hear a few of our animal scientists from Cornell. We're going to hear sort of a review from one of my students, Luis Monserrate, who has been managing our small plot trials for the last 3 years. So instead of seeing him out in the field, really, we're going to hear him flood you with data. We're going to hear from, we're very fortunate to have the Bish family here, and we're going to hear from Andrew, who is the president of the Hemp Feed Coalition. And you're probably getting the sense that our focus and our initiative this year is to look at hemp and hemp seed meal for the application as an ingredient for animal feed. So with generous funding from New York State, we've been able to start 3 animal feeding studies, and that's what our faculty from animal science are going to talk about. And then we're going to hear also a couple of speakers from Zoom who have been really integral in getting the animal feed ingredient studies going. That's Raj Kasula from Wenger Feed, and he led the laying hen feeding study that got hemp seed meal approved for laying hens. And then we're going to hear from Morgan Tweed of IND Hemp, who again has been a leader in the Hemp Feed Coalition, but really talking about how IND Hemp sees the future of that supply chain for animal feed. And then finally, to get us going right before lunch, we're going to hear from a guy who's actually done it in the field and produced delicious meat from bison fed with hemp, and that's for the grove of Brush Mountain Bison. So great schedule for the morning, and then we will head back to the pavilion for lunch. And then we will all caravan out to the field for a field day. Starting with our small plot variety trials, and we have representatives of most, not all, of the seed companies out there. And the one who's missing, my good friend Wendy Mosher, who won't send me seed for our trials. At New West Genetics, but she is my good friend. I wish you were here. Just want to mention the fantastic cultivars provided by New West Genetics, but unfortunately you won't see them here. We're going to demo, as is our tradition. Yesterday we were getting a big piece of equipment ready to run today. And again, I really appreciate the efforts of Jacob Bish and Brad and Andrew Bish helping out getting that set up. So we're going to run that through the variety strip trial, the variety that's ready today. Last year we did a lot of fiber production, and we showed you, if you were here, how to harvest, rake, and bale that fiber. This year we're just going to show you some baling because our fiber was ready to cut a few weeks ago. But a really interesting study I'm going to show you is we think that our variety, Ursa Grande, will be a very interesting one to fit into different crop rotations in New York State. And we need to understand how it's going to grow with different planting dates to fit into those crop rotations. So I'm going to show you a trial. It's about 4.5 acres total. Broken up into thirds that were planted on June 11th, June 30th, and July 18th. So I really want your feedback on that when you go out and see that trial. And then finally, we're going to end at our hemp processing facility, what we call the hemp tent. And we'll give you a quick demonstration of the FiberTrack 660 system that we have out there. You know, hemp is an interesting crop, has a lot of potential, but there are some things that we just don't understand about this crop. And this is a nice aerial view of the strip trials that we planted this year. So 7 different grain varieties, all planted on June 11th. And when you get out to the field, you'll see that on our annual crop fields, we break them up into 2-acre plots with driveways in between. But for this experiment, we took 4 of those plots and plowed them all together and plowed through the driveways. So it's about a 9-acre field. And my colleague Lynn Sosnowski made this figure. She's our wheat scientist. And how many of you would have predicted that the best growth was where the driveways were?
Yeah.
These are turf driveways, not gravel. And clearly there is some remnant effect of that 2-acre field in the upper left, and maybe some effect, well, because yeah, when you look at the upper left compared to the lower left, and you'll see it in the field, there's definitely a difference, which is a legacy effect of that particular 2-acre block. So think about this, and we're going to walk around and look at it in the field. And if we generate hypotheses for what the heck is going on here, we need to do more research so that these types of effects are not random, they're predictable. And how do we get that fantastic growth that we got in the driveways in our regular fields? I printed out, I think, 30 copies of all of our handouts for today, but they are also available online. So here's the QR code. I'll leave that up for a couple of minutes. And also the agenda. I did not produce a map. So in the afternoon, you know, get right in your car and get into that caravan. The places in the field are too far to walk from place to place. So we're going to try to be efficient and get that caravan in a nice path through the field blocks, so don't get lost. Let's get started. As always, we really thank our colleagues at New York State Ag and Markets. We've had a fantastic partnership with them. We get very generous support from New York State, so we thank the governor and the legislature for their strong support of our research program. And I always like to start our field days with an update from our Ag and Markets colleagues. Let us know if you are a current hemp grower in New York or a prospective hemp grower in New York, what the regulatory environment is, but it's also nice to hear you know, how things are going in the New York State hemp program. So my pleasure to introduce Chuck Schmitt from New York State Ag and Markets.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. Larry, Christine, thank you for the invitation. It's always good to come out, meet with some of you folks, answer some questions. I don't know if it's fortunately or unfortunately, but I really don't have any new news for you. We're still operating under the 2018 Federal Farm Bill. The Federal Farm Bill is what USDA uses to dictate our program here in New York. So USDA would be doing all the programs across the state as required by the Federal Farm Bill, unless the state stepped up and produced their own program. And at the end of 2021, New York State produced our own program. We pretty much follow the USDA format, and that's what guides our program moving forward. So nothing has changed. We expected a new farm bill, I believe, in 2022. Didn't happen. I believe they're every 4 years, so we're coming up on 2026. So possibly they'll will be another one by then. Part of the reason we like to think about the new farm bill is we're hoping that some of the regulations would ease up a bit, because I think years ago people were a little more frightened by industrial hemp. This day and age, it's proven to be a very valuable product for everyone. So really nothing to be afraid of. But things to remember if you're a grower. If you haven't submitted your planting report, we need you to submit that now. Even if you're not planting, there's a box on the report that you would check and indicate that you're not planting and get that in to us. We're seeing a lot of harvesting going on right now with the pre-harvest reports coming in. There's probably over 100 lab results I'm waiting on back in the office from harvests that have been done in this month alone. So that requires a pre-harvest report. You get that into Ginger, and she helps you with that. And then we get some folks out there to help you harvest that. So you can get on with selling and moving it into commerce. The program still requires an FBI background check. As I said, the Farm Bill hasn't changed. The total THC is still at 0.3%, which we had hoped with the new Farm Bill that would go up a bit, because even at 1%, it's really bad marijuana. So 0.3 is restrictively low, and it's one of those numbers that was set based on information from many years ago. So it would be good to get that up. We train sampling agents, or these independent folks that act as contractors that would come out to your farm and do the sampling for you, so that we can have a regulatory sample sent to the lab of your choice. And once that comes back less than 0.3, we grant you the right to harvest, and you can then move your product into commerce. Also, all the growers have to register through the local FSA office, so the FSA knows where your fields are and can help you with that. As you know, if you apply for a license, we have to have that background summary check. We need to have all the information about where you're growing, what you're growing. We ask for specific locations, so that if we need to come out and inspect the field, we can do that. There's still a $500 application fee, and those need to be mailed in to the office. We need that signature. And also where you're getting your seed from is very important. Oops. The license, as you know, is good for 3 years. So we're just now in 2025, we're at the place where the 3-year licenses are expiring and people are renewing for the next 3-year period, because we gave the first licenses out in 2022. We are notifying folks with their license expiring and 90 days ahead of time, try to give them plenty of time to renew, so that there's no gap in their licensing. As you see, the background check is good for 60 days, so we will need a new one. If you're re-upping your license, it's a matter, it's very much like starting over. We need the new background check, we need the $500, we need the new application, and all those issues. A few reasons why your application might be denied. Now, we try to work with folks and we try to help fix the application rather than just flat out deny it. Usually when there's these type of problems that we see there, we'll give you a call. We'll say, hey, can we help you do this, do that, and talk to you about how we can make this work for you. As I said, we want to know where the seeds are coming from. We do look them all up, make sure they're not going to grow up to be marijuana. We do see that coming in once in a while. Hemp growers are looking to grow really adult use, which is not something we can do in our program. That's an OCM program. Okay. Growers should know where they're going to sell it before they grow it. Obviously, that's a big issue with processing in New York State. You need to know your zoning laws, where you can put an agricultural product, where you can't. And again, the THC compliance is based on total THC, which is THCA plus the THC delta 9. All right. All growers can be inspected by us. Our inspectors go out to each location once in a 3-year period. If there's issues, we might come back more often, but generally just once in the 3-year period, They're inspected by us. You'd retain all your records for 3 years, and those records can be inspected by ourselves or the USDA as well. It's kind of a quick summary I gave you because really nothing's changed from the last couple of years. Here's some contact information should you have questions regarding adult use marijuana or CBD processing or the sale of CBD products. That all goes through the Office of Cannabis Management. I believe they were here yesterday speaking with you. It does not go through our office. Questions and information through our office would be at this website and phone number. We do answer the phone when you call. We try to help you out as much as we can. But that's how to get in contact with us. I think I missed one slide. Let me back up, give you one slide. This one. The program statistics for this year. I'll end with that. You can see we have just shy of 300 grower licenses out there. There are 2,250 acres that have been registered, but not all those acres are being grown. You can see that we have 355 million square feet registered for indoor growing, but unfortunately only 14,200 of those square feet are actually planted. And for the outdoors, 138 acres, okay? We have those 14 sampling agents. These are the independent contractors that would come out to your field that you would hire to take the regulatory sample to get that into the lab and get you on your way with your harvest. And we also have vetted 23 testing labs that are also on our website with the sampling agents. So you can go to our website, find a person to take your sample, find a lab to send it to. And then the results will come back to us, they'll come back to you, and if everything looks good, we'll release the hemp to your for your use. Does anyone have any questions? Yes, sir.
All right, so I'm curious about the OCM and
Yeah.
how that department sort of works with your department. Also in Pennsylvania, you guys are a little further along in your
Yeah.
cannabis regulation than we are. So I'm just curious how those two different departments work.
Yeah, that's a good question. We are
Chuck, could you just repeat the question?
yes. The question was whether the OCM and Ag and Markets work together. How do we work together? We are a little further ahead of where they are, and could I help explain that? Yes, I would like to. We do only hemp, okay? OCM is a completely different agency. We can't do any adult use because we're beholden to the USDA, and as such, marijuana is federally illegal, so we're not allowed to do anything with marijuana. The OCM was established, I think they took over the marijuana regulations that the Department of Health was doing medical marijuana. That's all moved to the Office of Cannabis Management now that that office is set up. We don't really work together. We try to work together. You would think we would have better communication, but unfortunately, I'm here to say we really don't. They need to come up with, from what we're told, a nursery license for folks to grow adult use marijuana. We are the agency charged with inspecting all plants grown in New York State. So we too have to come up with a nursery license we have the license ready, but we are hesitant to give that license out before OCM gives out their license, because we don't want people to interpret our license as a license to grow marijuana, which it's not. So we're kind of waiting on them. It's been said in the press, so I'm not the first one to say it, but many people have said it seems like the OCM is flying the airplane while they're still building it. And, you know, that feels very true. We've asked them for, cooperation together. We don't always get good cooperation, but we are two separate agencies, which some would say is a lot of excess.
Do you see a time when it might just, do you see a time when the cannabis plant will just sort of be managed by one department?
Yeah, do I see a time when the cannabis plant might be managed by one department? That would be nice, but that won't happen until federal regulations change. But yeah, we do inspect all plants grown in New York State. We inspect all plant dealers. So they are under our purview. OCM is kind of just a small section of that.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chuck, for that
Yeah.
answer. And to the gentleman's question, my understanding is CBD, someone could have grow CBD, be below threshold for THC, but that license is still going to flow through OCM and not your divisions. So that if I have that understanding correct, that's an important distinction.
Yeah, the license, many of our hemp growers now are still growing for CBD. But you make a good point. Adult use of marijuana growers through the OCM can also grow CBD. And likely they would have a higher percentage of CBD because it kind of trails along with the THC. The higher the THC, the more CBD you're going to get. So yes, they if they're interested in higher CBD, either license I think would work for them. Yes. Thank you.
Well, yeah, just one question I'll ask.
Yeah.
So you mentioned something about with the new farm bill, you know, we would have more lenient regulations. Do you foresee New York following that or having more stricter regulations? And also, I didn't see anything mentioned about remediation. I don't know the New York laws. I just wondered about that.
Yeah, he's asking about New York laws and the whether it would be relaxed a little bit if the new farm bill comes in with lower numbers or changes the rules a bit. Yes, we're beholden to the USDA, so as soon as those rules change, we would change with them. We're, you know, what I said about a higher threshold for total THC, I think, and no background check, those are hopeful things. Those are things that I've heard people talk about, but they haven't been enacted yet. I'm hoping that that will relax a bit as time goes on, but again, that's just my opinion at this point. And the other part of your question was, would we follow those rules? We'll follow the new farm bill as it's enacted because that's what the USDA would require us to do.
But
Terry was asking about remediation.
Oh, yes, yeah, I didn't talk about remediation. So there's a couple of ways when the product does, total THC does go over 0.3, we try to work with the producer to remediate it. There's a couple different ways they can do that. To remove all the flower and then test what's left, which would definitely bring down your CBD and THC numbers. What most people will do is they'll leave the flowers intact. They'll bring the product into a grinding area. They'll grind it all up together. So you're mixing stems and leaves and flowers. And then we'll take a sample of that batch. And again, that likely brings it below 0.3 so that then you can then go ahead and use it. But if doing all that and it's still above 0.3, we have to follow the letter of the law and we have to ask people to dispose of it, which is really unfortunate because it's not good for marijuana. What are you going to do with it? But that's the rules. The rules are if you can't get it below 0.3% THC, total THC, then it has to be destroyed.
More question?
Did you have a question? Yeah.
Thank you. Question, I know we talked a lot about, they are talking about this hemp and CBD. Are there any upcoming regulations when that shifts over to other compounds like CBN, CBG, and others?
Yeah, are there any other regulations beyond just the CBD regulations, CBN, CBG, things like that? In our department, we treat it all as one. We don't regulate the volume of CBD you can get out of the product, but we know from research that Larry's done, if we get too greedy with the CBD, then the THC numbers kind of follow up behind that. You might end up burning yourself with a really high CBD or CBN or CBG number, but also then a THC level that's above 0.3. But no, to answer your question, there aren't any different regulations for the different types of CBD, CBN, and CBG products. Thank you very much.
Right. So I'm very pleased to introduce Luis Monserrate. Again, he is in the final year of his PhD, has done a fantastic job of managing our field trials over the last 3 years and has been a leader in helping to commercialize our first 2 cultivars. And he's going to focus on fiber again in his talk. which was what most of our work last year was focused on. Okay, Luis, it's all yours.
Right, thank you, Larry. So yeah, as he said, today, given that as you see in your agenda, the field day is mostly focused on grain, so I'll give you just a little bit of fiber information, and that would be what? Oh, okay. And more specifically, I will be covering the work that we have been doing on the breeding and assessing of our new fiber cultivars. But to start off, I think it is important to acknowledge our beginnings. We have been doing breeding of hemp for 9 years. So this picture you see on the right is actually one of Larry's former interns measuring the heights of one of the small plot trials in Ithaca in 2017. Larry says that that was a very beautiful field trial. I personally think that my trial were much beautiful, but we're allowed to have our own opinions, I guess. Yeah, so, but since then, when it comes to breeding or selecting hemp lines, we abide by these 5 overarching criteria. THC compliance, absolutely. We want to maximize fiber yield, so we need to select for late flower individuals when we talk about fiber. And that fiber needs to be easy to decorticate. So that's another important criteria. And when it comes to dual purpose or grain, we want to maximize the protein content in those seeds. And lastly, we just don't want cultivars that are ideal for New York, but also they are very competitive across different latitudes nationwide. So we also do that kind of analysis as well. So in 2021, when I started my PhD, I was asked to put together a nice summary graph of our small plot trials, of all the cultivars and all the yields. So here is a graph from that encompasses 2018 to 2021 in Ithaca. And here, actually, it was published in this, let's see, in this nice book chapter here. But the main thing that I want to point out here is this amazing yield that we can see here in 2019, which for hand cold, SI1, Puma, Yuma, perhaps Lama as well, which will have over 20 million per hectare or about that. So that's very promising and very encouraging, especially the yields in that year, 2019. However, the total THC concentration in 2019 tells a different story. And yes, you can definitely get a lot of yield, but at the cost of a high risk of exceeding the THC limit. So here, the cultivars that I listed, SI1, Bama, Yuma, Hanko, Puma, and so forth, they're all over the limit for that year. So that's not ideal, right? So what we want to is de-risk that potential. And so this is a problem, and we need to fix it. And thankfully, we know how this works, and we can work to fix it. Some of you already know how this story goes. There are 2 enzymes, each coded by a different gene. For this the one on the left, we have a homozygous THC type, also known chemotype 1, which has 2 copies of the gene that code for the enzyme THCA synthase. And when you have a copy of that gene, that codes for THCA synthase and a copy of the gene that codes for the CBDA synthase, you have a heterozygous, also known as chemotype 2. In both of those cases, you have a high risk that, of your hemp exceeding that THC limit at the harvest. But thankfully, we have another chemotype 3, homozygous CBD type, in which you have 2 copies of the gene that codes for the CBDA synthase enzyme, which for all intents and purposes is what we like to call hemp. However, since we know how this works, actually, we can use genetic markers to do marker selection, actually helping us in the breeding program, and that's what we do. And actually did. We did this marker selection of these seedlings. You can see in these many trays of many labels for every single well of that tray that allow us to develop cultivars such as, for example, Ursa alta. Alta being the name of the cultivar, and Ursa being the trademark designation, which stands for, is Latin for bear, which is the Cornell's mascot. Yeah, so once we do this work, you can see here a nice scale-up of Ursa alta here in the greenhouse. So only the plants that were selected being homozygous for the for example, the three are here. But one thing is like looking genotypically, and also need to look at phenotypically. So the best way to do it is to actually get a third-party certificate of analysis. So this one was from last year, actually, one of our large-scale trials. And here you can see that we are actually way below that limit. So definitely we can corroborate that phenotypically, genotypically, and phenotypically we are under the limit and we are compliant. But then the next question that we ask ourselves is, how do we compare with other commercial cultivars? Like, yes, we have a cultivar that is compliant, but how does it compare this one or all the other fiber cultivars that we have with what is out there? But to answer that question, actually, or many or more, I would like to answer them with you along this presentation. And it's like, to these Cornell cultivars, our yield the current conventional cultivars? Does the planting date affect this fiber yield that we can get? And are there cultivar differences in not just yield, but also the quality of that yield? And if we have these small plot trials, how does that yield compared to a large scale production? So to do that, we if you are a current attendant of these field days, you'll see me talk in front of my fields from 2022, 2023, and 2024. And these were in two planting dates, mid-May and early June, as you can see here in these aerial pictures. In 2022, we didn't have a second planting date. And overall, we evaluated 18 fiber cultivars in a randomized complete plot design with 4 reps, as you can see here. Another thing you can see here is this, perhaps the image is clear enough, these empty squares that you see right there. So those are the representative areas that we ended up harvesting to estimate our yields. And how they look like is like this. So we have this, all the stems bundle up, one per rep, collect moisture content samples, and we weigh in this bucket, scale in the field, and eventually to get an accurate value, we get the dry registrar. So we have to lay in flat on the field and let it rest over time. But that's just yield, right? So the next step is actually how good is that yield? So here we have our own Bish. I use the Bish research corrugator that enabled us to remove that outer layer, which is the bast from the herd, and get that composition of the corrugator material per individual, per rep, and per cultivar as well. So moving on to the yield. So this is the yield in 2022. First off, it's important that we need to consider actually a commercial cultivar, a commercial check. There are certain parameters that we want to follow to determine that. One is commercially available, high yielding, and basically our point of reference to surpass. And for us, that's cultivar. So when we look at our y-axis, you see the metric tons per hectare on the left and the US tons per acre on the right. So for cultivar, we have about 6 to 7 metric tons per hectare, whereas with Ursa Alta, we are more than doubling that yield of cultivar. So that's great. And you might say, well, Luis, you are really like skipping SI1 and cold that are equally as performing, perhaps even more. And you may be right. However, as I showed you before, these are cultivars, based on these items, these are cultivars that are a high risk of exceeding THC limit. So it's a problem. Yes, you may get the yield, but you will potentially have a high risk of exceeding the limit. So, but however, I do see that potential. We have seen it in previous years, so we're not ignoring them. So what we can do is, again, market selection and develop cultivars out of them, just to tap into the yield and minimize the risk of exceeding the THC limit. To look at the quality, you look at this graph, stack bar plot, you see the composition of the corrugator material in percentages. You have all the cultivars to the x-axis. This is for 2022 again, sorry. And this is breaking down from the bottom up, pass, herd, and the loss in the corrugation process. So we use that Bish research corrugator to allow us to get these values. So in this case, our Ursa Alta and this graph is organized, total cultivars is organized from the highest to the lowest, from left to right. So unfortunately for us, this Ursa Alta has less than 10% of bast content. So it's very striking to see when you compare it to cultivar, for example, in which that bast content is double that of Ursa Alta. So it's interesting, and something like we need to work on. Yes, we have high yield, but the quality of the yield might be as best as commercial check. So when we look at Futura 83, this makes sense because we group them based on where they're coming from. All the work that have been done for decades in many countries in Europe allows them to have this high bass content. That's how nice they're grouping on the left. Whereas we only have less than a decade of breeding as ours, so we're still working on it. But you know, we're achieving one thing at a time. The last thing I want you to follow along and pay attention is where this Futura 83 is ranked over the next years for the quality of it. Just pay attention to that part. Now, in 2023, so it's another year in which we see that our cultivars are out yielding our commercial checks. This is very good. We have for Futura 83 having about over 10 metric tons per hectare, whereas we have outside 1143, 1142 between 15 to 17 metric tons per hectare in the first planting, and in the second planting as well surpasses Futura 83. Another thing that you will notice here is that we no longer have SL1 and gold. We have 23 level 43 and 23 level 42 respectively, because we obtained those cultivars from the selection of those land races, population. So yeah, we are another year. We are very consistent with the affordability. However, life is not perfect. We found out that some plants escape our screening selection from this line, and unfortunately, if you cultivate this green line, you will have high risk of exceeding its limit. So this is just to show you that we are committed to minimize the risk of exceeding these our cultivars as much as possible. So we have to go back and we actually redid our screening to get a cultivar that will not give you that risk. So let's look at the quality in 2022. So yes, we were on top of the charts on the previous graph for yield, but in this case, we're at the bottom of that for all of our cultivars. So we compared with our check variety. So our cultivars are between 15 to 20% in the first and second planting. But when we look at the European material, for example, for 33, it is a 38% bass, which is amazing, insane. It's very high. And again, it makes sense. In this case, this is another European cultivar group with all the European cultivars together on top of the charts for quality. And it's nice to see how everything checks out. Now, last year was 2024. You may have seen this small plot trials if you were here. And we can confidently say that we have yield stability. Another year, for the third year in a row, we are double charge for our yields. We are definitely doubling the yield of 23 that you have here. And then you see that it's at 24-13-80 instead of 11-43. This is the new selection, and actually these two green lines were approved for eligibility in AOSCA. So now we can confidently say that we have no risk of exceeding the limit. And lastly, we can look at the in 2024. Here we see that our cultivars do not report a high concentration of bass compared to our commercial check. And in this case, you see that Futura is ranked 5th in that group. All these Europeans again are grouped very nicely, and this just reinforces the idea that there are bass cultivars and herd cultivars for sure. But as I was saying earlier, I was saying in the presentation, our breeding program is just big enough. Yes, we improve our yield, but quality is next. And perhaps the yellow will give a hint to some of you. The reason why I was asking you to keep track of Futura 83 is ranking, of course, all the years, is because you see that it keeps varying the position across the years, which is expected based on environmental conditions. But all the Europeans, they tend to cluster very nicely. So we can definitely tap into that genetic mechanism underlying that high bass content and put it into our commercial cultivars and not just improve yield, but also improve the quality of such yield. Now, everything is beautiful when you do a small plot trials, and it's very ideal to assess multiple cultivars at once. However, in the real world, the real production system, you plant large areas we no longer harvest by hand. We use fiber cut harvesters, for example, and you can see that in this short action film by Jacob. You can see how we actually harvest. You see one of our trials from last year on the right. And instead of measuring a small amount of stems in a bucket on a small scale, we actually were weighing bales, that you can see at the bottom here, which is much more laborious and more dense. But so just to recap, overall for all the trials, when we look at Ursa Alta, we have an average yield of 7.6. Let's just round that up to 8. We look at 23 up to 4. This is mobile trials. This is tons per acre. Okay? So we have 8 tons per acre of Alta. We have 4 tons per acre of 23, and we have 3 tons per acre of 579. Now, when we look at the yield that we get in a large scale production, those are actually, instead of 8, we have 4. Instead of 4, we have 2. And instead of 3, we have 2 for each of these cultivars. So this tells you about the realistic yield that you can achieve when you harvest a large production. And this is something that we can expect from predicted losses in the harvesting and baling process of these bales. So let's see if we answer all these questions. Do the Cornell cultivars have a yield correct conventional material? Absolutely. On average, they double the yield of our commercial check to this point. So that's excellent. Does the plant today affect the fiber yield? From what you can see, yes, plant as early as possible. Are there cultivar differences in yield and quality? Yes. European for bast and herd. Sorry, and for yield and herd. So it's that was what I was saying earlier, is that there are cultivars for bast and there are cultivars for herd. So, and lastly, can we compare the small plot yield to large scale production? Yes, but there are predictable losses in harvesting and baling. If you remember what I was saying, the doubling, the proportional difference, sorry, the double was proportional compared to the small scale and the large scale. Yeah, with that, I'd like to acknowledge all my founding sergeants and the various lab members. Thank you so much, and welcome any questions.
Thank you, Luis. After you have done the screening, have you looked at how stable that is? You know, that goes through seed increases and you get generations removed from the screening process. Does that stay stable, or does it tend to pick up more of those heterozygous individuals back in the population over time?
The question is if the chemotype 3 or low THC trait is stable over several scale-ups, several years of scale-ups. Is that correct?
Right.
Okay. If we maintain a pollen isolated field recurrently, and we are very meticulous with potential parent populations or adjacent trials that are in less than 2 miles radius of our scale location, yes, that trait should be stable. Will not be given that we have done a correct screening process, that trait should be stable, will be stable.
Thank you, Luis.
Yeah.
I might have missed it, but I was just wondering, at what stage did you cut down the fiber trial? Plant stage.
Yeah, that's a good question. Sorry, I couldn't get into too much detail on my methodology. The fiber was harvested at 50% flower. So with 50% individuals, whether they were male or female, overall they reach 50%. And that is to maximize yield, minimize loss in fiber quality.
You mentioned in the beginning something that was important for you guys to look at was like ease of decortication. Beyond like fast composition, or is there any other quantitative or qualitative metrics that you look at to assess ease of decortication? And in either case, what is like the most ideal qualities that you're looking for?
So the question is, are there other measurements of piece of decortication besides the base content? Yes, there are papers from Italy actually looking into this, from 2018, from 2024 recently. In this, they categorize decorticability and base content. So the base content, as you can see, always there, and the decorticability is how many time does it take for you to efficiently remove the base from the herd. So it means that how clean is your base coming, because as you can imagine, there will be hair attached to it, right? So that's another measurement of fiber quality that you look into it.
Okay, last question from Jacob.
Hi, if you get twice the yield and half the bass percentage, doesn't it sort of even out and get just as much bass per year?
I knew you were gonna ask that. The question is if we double the yield, but the bass content is half of our commercial check, does the yield even out? I came prepared. So in some cases, yes. So this is 2022. You can see the bass yield here that you can see across all hotels in 2022. So when you look at Ursa Alta here, this it's about like 1 metric ton per hectare of bass to produce a higher, smaller variability. 2023, we see that this is the same order as the yield. Sorry, so it's the order. For that year specifically, when it was like 38%, yes, for 2023 was massive. For that first planting, but not a second planting compared to our cultivars. In 2024, you still see that fertility is competitive in essence, except for the second planting compared to level 2 of the everything. So, does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Need to move on. Quick question.
Okay, so are these slides gonna be shared? Okay.
Okay.
Yeah, so we're recording everything on Zoom and the slides are shared on Zoom. So once Greg gets things edited, we'll.
Thank you.
And yeah, this will be published. I'm reviewing Luis's manuscript on these right now. So yeah. Great. Thank you. Yeah. Figuring this out. Really happy to introduce Andrew Bish and give him the floor to introduce this topic now that we're shifting to, which is using hemp seed meal as an animal feed ingredient. And I think Andrew is going to give you a convincing case for why this is a very strong potential for hemp in the future. So, Andrew.
Well, good morning, everybody. Happy to be here. I'm Andrew Bish. I'm going to talk a little bit about the good work that we do at the Hemp Feed Coalition. Here's me. I'm the founder, chief operating officer of Bish Enterprises. We're a family-owned business. Been in business since 1976. My mother and father are here embarrassing me with cameras. I'll embarrass myself. Anyway, that's my day job. I then moonlight as the president of the Hemp Feed Coalition. I've been working with the Hemp Feed Coalition since 2020. And I also do some work with the National Hemp Association. I work on the standing committee of hemp organizations. So a little bit about me. Beyond that, I forgot, I've got family. You can see me in the bed of the combine. This is back all the way in 2017 with my daughter. I think she was 8 years old. That was before hemp was legal in the state of Nebraska. So we brought a bunch of material back. I was a felon at that point in time, but I hadn't been caught yet. So here's us doing some grain trials. That's I think that was back in 2019, and of course we put hemp into a bag. Long story short, I've been in this industry since 2015 inadvertently. I got in through one of our customers. I wasn't a hemp guy. I became a hemp guy because I think that there's a lot of opportunity for rotational crop opportunity, which I'll talk about. But we're building Nebraska, a tiny town of about 400 people in the central part of Nebraska, just off the interstate. I come from a long line of farmers. My grandfather, both of them are farmers, inventors. My grandfather was the first person to put a corn sheller on a combine. So that's something that we can hang our hats on. We've innovated agricultural harvesting implements since 1976, trying to solve problems for farmers that big companies like Case IH, John Deere aren't serving. I believe in the farmer. That's why I do everything that I do. Farming is hard. Farmers don't get a lot of credit for what they do. It's an overlooked industry. I love to be a part of the agricultural industry. I think in a way that other industries aren't, we're more of a family than you find in maybe the tech industry or some of the other industries out there. There's good reason why people work in agriculture, and it's usually of a higher power. So market conditions are terrible in general, which I'm sure you've seen if you follow any ag markets. This is just a sampling. I follow a guy named Greg Peterson from Machinery Pete, and his posts are the most depressing of all of LinkedIn when I look at them. It's retirement auction after retirement auction. This is just a sampling of 1 week's retirement auctions from this winter. So that's a challenge that we have obviously in the industry. And what do we do to solve it? Well, why is this happening? We can get into a lot of reasons, but I think when we're going to fix it is when we figure out how to rotate our crops, because things start to get interesting. We start to attract more people. When there's revenue in industries, it's interesting how people want to go into them. When there's a lack of revenue, you don't get the same interest level. So I believe in crop rotation. I come from a land of lack of crop rotation. Most of our farmers are corn and soybean farmers, and we're starting to see less and less corn and soybean farmers. We're starting to see more and more continuous corn farmers. That's dangerous for a lot of reasons, and I don't need to tell you all why that is. But that's what I'm after here. And that's why I work with the Hemp Feed Coalition. Animals are great, feed's great. But to me, it's rotational crop opportunities. If we're going to open up the hemp market, we need to go after the easiest commodities first. Hemp grain is clearly one of those. Who are we at the Hemp Feed Coalition? Our vision is to grow hemp producers and processors access to the billion-dollar animal feed supplement market, completing the local supply chain from farm to feeder. Long story short, we're trying to legalize hemp as animal feed. Here's some of the good people that do that. We've got myself. Wendy Mosier runs a company called New West Genetics, one of the foremost genetics companies in the industrial space, and the only extremely strong player in the commercial space right now, outside of post-secondary institutions in terms of developing genetics. Justin Swanson out of Indiana. Bill Bookout, National Animal Supplement Council. Ken Elliott runs a company called IND Hemp, or founded that company. His daughter, Morgan, our executive director, actually runs that company. Dr. Raj Kasula, who's not with us today, right? Serves on our board of directors. Really smart guy from Wenger Foods, just down in Pennsylvania, one of the first companies to release a hemp-fed egg. And then Thomas now.
He's on Zoom, so.
Oh, he's gonna be on Zoom.
He's on Zoom right now, so.
Oh, great.
Say good things about him.
Well, of course, I couldn't say enough good things about Raj. And then Thomas, who works with Wilbur Ellis, out of Canada. And then we've got Dr. Christine Ely. She does scientific research and reports for us at the Hemp Feed Coalition. So let's take a little look at market pricing. Some of what we see here currently. Hemp seed grain organic is being purchased at about $1.35 a pound, with conventional grain at about 70 cents a pound, with conventional meal coming in at about 27 cents. Now, one of the challenges we have in the industry is when we compare that with conventional soybean meal, we can see that we're at 15 cents. So we're significantly cheaper. Also, a thing to know. This is a little pointer thing. Yeah, you can see here that soybeans are netting about 53 bushel an acre, where we're about 18 to 28 bushel an acre on hemp. So when you look at this, you say, well, the number's about half as much, but it's really about a quarter. or 4 times more expensive, if you want to look at it that way. So that's a challenge to the feed industry. So and then you got corn over here sitting here at 7 cents, and 188 bushels an acre. So, there gets to be a lot of questions about why. Yeah. But I think that there's a good answer to that. We go and start to look at the on-farm revenue, per acre, and things do start to change, when you look at hemp seed meal. So, those higher price points are helping on the farm, where, if you're at the low end, about 18 bushel an acre, you got $400 an acre, that's probably not profitable most places, although Western Kansas can sustain things like that. 952 is a lot more interesting at 28. When this number starts to be about 2,000, because we've doubled the yield per acre, it starts to become a lot more interesting for farmers. But also that allows us to drive down that price point of the meal itself. Again, if you compare that against corn, it starts to play well with corn, partially because the price of corn right now is awful, right? So if corn were a little bit higher, hemp is a little bit tougher sell. We are seeing a lot more attraction to people wanting to go into hemp grain production, though, because it is in a lot of cases outpacing corn, although we have a limited market. So, and then of course soybeans here, about 547. That, by the way, is a number as to why a lot of farmers in Nebraska are turning away from soybeans. The just cost per acre. So all acres aren't created equal. All land prices are not the same. And especially in a place like central Nebraska, where I come from, or even here, your land prices are pretty inflated. So you're not going to be $5, $7 per acre. That doesn't make sense. Hemp seed processing, hemp seeds turn into a bunch of different things. So we got hemp seed oil, hemp seed cake or meal, hemp hulls, and hemp pulps. From a percentage standpoint, we're looking at about 25% protein. There's 30 to 35% of that seed is the oil. So that means we've got about 30% of that meal, which is kind of what that translates into. We have some polyunsaturated fatty acids, linoleic acid, and alpha linoleic acid. That's probably one of the exciting parts about hemp is omega-3, omega-6 fatty acids, and how those transfer into the meat base of the animals. Here's some nutrient principles. Raj is going to talk a little bit more about this, so I'm not going to spend too much time on these numbers, although these charts will be available. Long story short, he's got a very unique nutritional profile that lends itself well to being a good supplement in the diet, a good addition to the ration. By the way, we're not promoting and never do promote feeding animals solely hemp seed meal or solely hemp seed, fully hemp seeds consistently. It's part of the ration. And when we do that, we start to see some health benefits. This is an interesting thing that was noticed was lutein in the eye, which helps reduce macular degeneration. I'm sure Raj will talk more about that, but that's an interesting side effect to eating hemp seeds. Chickens, that's been one of our big focus at the Hemp Feed Coalition. Here's some chickens we're feeding hemp to. These are actually in Nebraska. These are Nebraska chickens, and I possibly ate the eggs from these chickens. So just a couple miles from our facility, we shot this little video. IND Hemp provided us some hemp seed meal to give to these chickens, who were very happy. Hemp seed meal makes chickens very happy. So there's not any cannabinoids that are produced inside of hemp grain, but we do see surface contamination, and that's been one of the biggest problems that we have in the hemp industry in general. Is that's the barrier. When we see cannabinoids, all of a sudden politicians become completely unreasonable. Regulators aren't sure how to behave. So not in the seed, but potentially on the seed. So but what we're finding, for instance, we just received results back from our lamb study, the tissue samples, and we found non-detectable levels of cannabinoids in kidney, muscle, and fat tissues of the sheep. with only minimal levels detected in the liver, and those were in the parts per billion. So very, very low levels and not consistent throughout all the samples in the liver. So again, it's very low cannabinoid input, and then the transference is almost non-existent as a result of that. So that's really positive, because that's the question when we try to introduce hemp as an animal feed ingredient for any of these animals. The FDA wants to know what is the amount of cannabinoids that are in that food ingredient that's going to be delivered to the public. And what they would like to see is an answer called non-detectable, which is below 1 part per million. Currently, you look at the animal feed market, $570 billion in US dollars in 2022, is projected to grow to 816.78 by 2030. So that's quite a rate of growth. That's going to require a lot of grain. Again, hemp's unique nutritional profile, high protein content, can lend itself well there as a supplement. So like I mentioned, we're going to talk about chickens here, but up here, in terms of species, the poultry segment dominated the market in 2022 with the highest revenue. 36% of animal feed went into the poultry industry globally. Economics. This is my favorite part because this shows really the opportunity here. So we go back, we can look at how many tons of meal are being produced, but currently 52% of feed is corn, 12% soybean meal, and then DDGs coming in at 11%, and those three collectively make up 75% of the entire industry of animal feed. So what does that mean in terms of acres if the hemp starts to impact this at all? So if we take just a look at egg layers in the United States based on 2024 numbers, what I like to look at is its market share of 5%. I think that's a completely reasonable number to be able to obtain. We're not capable of doing that in the US right now, because if you look at that, that means we need 263,000 acres, and that's if we're feeding those chickens just 20% of their diet to be hemp seed meal. So if 5% of chickens are eating 20% of their diet in hemp seed meal, you need almost 275,000 acres of hemp grain produced in the United States. We currently don't have enough seed to do that. So that's a challenge. That's where it's important. Anybody here that's working on seed production, genetics, that's crucial, because the industry needs that available to it to be able to grow them. But that's a lot. So we've started to talk about 265,000 acres. Now a rotational crop is a potential opportunity. And hemp seed does not require a lot of processing. Creating hemp seed meal is fairly simple. We get into beef cattle. That's our current application that we're working on right now at the Hemp Feed Coalition. Beef cattle, lambs. Now we're looking at some bigger numbers here. So number of grain acres needed, that comes in at 1.015 million acres, especially, and again, that's looking at that 5% market share at a 20% inclusion in the finishing diet. So that's where those numbers end up. That's pretty substantial. And if you're curious about the acreage, I did note that we are presuming about 1,000 pounds per acre, which may very well be optimistic in a lot of places. And the reality is it is very optimistic. I'm not sure what our current average grain yield is in the United States, but I think we're somewhere around 800 pounds per acre on average. That means a lot of guys are getting 400 pounds an acre. So that's, this is a long story short, this is a reasonable number to figure these off of. As we increase yields, obviously the number of acres would go down, but as that price point would go down, the hemp seed meal becomes more attractive as well. So we might see an increase in demand as a result of that. Now we get into New York. I ran the stats on New York because that's where we are. and you guys don't produce a lot of chickens is what I found. You produce some, but you're not, the #1 chicken producing state. So you could satisfy, the chickens, at that 5% market share, with about 4,300 acres here in the state of New York. Now, that's presuming you have no export. So if you're only producing that material for yourself, that's what that looks like. You could potentially sell hemp seed to other states where they're feeding chickens, and that number would increase. But we start to look at the broiler chickens, we add another 853 acres. So again, not a lot. That's, you just don't have a lot of birds here is what I identified. But that's okay. We get into beef cattle, 48,000 acres. So between all of those, if we were to open that up, you know, we're into just over 50,000 grain acres needed in the state of New York to satisfy some of these animals. And this doesn't include any pets, just looking at those meat animals now. Now, that's a big boost though. Right now, the number of acres grown in New York this last year was
138.
Yeah, so this would be good, right? This would be a good thing. That'd be a shot in the arm. And again, it's pretty easy to obtain hemp seed meal. So our current, let's see, did I skip past? No, I went through all of those numbers. So those are what the economics look like for the state of New York, for the United States. Again, to me, it looks like that's one of the easiest offtake opportunities that there are. And something to think about when we look at hemp seed, the byproduct of that is, well, you've got a couple things. You can till that under, and then you've got that meaty in your soil, or you can look at a harvest where you're going to pick up some herd off of that. So sometimes farmers can gain, you know, maybe a ton of herd material on a per acre basis. That's going to increase those revenues on the farm, but also that lowers the cost of herd production. So if we're looking at how do we reduce some of the costs of herd production, grain is 100% a way to do that. Next week, there is an event here, I believe, building event. You're going to spend 3 days building. One of the challenges with hemp in general, again, is you might see an inflated upfront cost to do that. Now, if we were to look at herd possibly as a secondary byproduct of grain production, now all of a sudden that becomes less and less and less, and those building materials become a lot more competitive, again, driving that market even stronger. So it's a game of volume, and my thoughts on all of this and our position at the Hemp Feed Coalition is grain is an easy way to obtain volume. If you look at it across regular crop production, regular commodity crops, it is grain fed to animals that drives all of those commodities. That's what's driving soybeans. That's what's driving corn. Ethanol is great. That's not the driver today. It's feeding cows and corn. So where are we at in terms of current state status? There are a number of states actually that allow for legal hemp to be fed. So in Montana, you can feed that to companion animals, horses, pets, whatever you've got there. Texas has a unique law. You can feed hemp seed meal and hemp seed oil to both chickens and horses. So that's allowed. Tennessee, you can actually feed anything you want to one of their animals. And you have to tell the customer that you have fed it hemp. And if you do that, you can feed it really whatever you want. They classified hemp as an adulterant, which isn't necessarily the best classification, but it did allow it to enter the marketplace in the state of Tennessee. And then there's a number of states working on some different legislative actions. Pennsylvania is looking at adding pets and horses into the mix as an option for offtake. And those little efforts are definitely making headway. What we do need to do though is gain approval through the FDA. And the reason for that is we need to be able to work within the guidelines of interstate commerce. State of Montana, you can't export without feed or an animal outside of the state. You couldn't do that with Tennessee. Can't do it with any of these states. So How do we do that? We've got a long timeline. This actually kind of documents the actual application process, which took us about 3 years for egg-laying chickens. In 2025, we received official publication status with AFCO. And that's the first animal. So we got to work on a lot more. We do have a blueprint though on how to get this done. We understand how to communicate effectively with the FDA. We know what the FDA wants. We know how to write the application. We believe that we can shorten this timeline possibly down to 24 months. Probably won't be any shorter than that. The FDA just takes 6 months to respond once you send them a letter. But again, we've got a better relationship. They tend to be more responsive now with us than they were early on. What's next at the Hemp Feed Coalition? Beef cattle, lamb, Herb Groves here. He produces bison. He wants us to add that to the application. We might be able to do that. We're looking for, going to get some data from him. That'd be nice if we could add 3 more animals in one application, which is a ruminant application. Further down the road, we'd like to do more work with horses and chickens. I think the horse is a tremendous opportunity. The oil can be given to horses in a lot of different capacities. And the challenge with legalizing all of these animals for hemp seed meal is we've got 70% of the seed we've got to figure out what to do with. We've got to figure out what to do with the hulls. We got to figure out what we're going to do with the oil. The market right now, to give you an idea, if we talk to processors cannot keep producing hemp seed meal because they're full of oil. They're stockpiling oil or they're having to discard oil, but that's currently the bottleneck we're now at, which is a good bottleneck because before we had a bunch of meal piling up and that was a result of oil production. So now we have oil piling up as a result of meal production. So we got to find these offtake opportunities. Horses aren't going to be the ticket probably, but again, it's one more offtake opportunity. We just have to keep finding these little offtake opportunities. Personally, I think biofuels is a reasonable option, especially because the cost of oil right now for hemp seed oil is pretty low due to the meal production needs. But that's what we're working on. We'd like to see a broiler application go through. We just need some cannabinoid data to be able to do that. We could probably fast track the broiler application as little as 18 to 24 months total, because we can piggyback off of our current results that we have for egg layers. So that broilers would be pretty easy. What are the challenges ahead? Pretty much all of them. We're trying to grow a market. There's an unlimited amount of challenges. What genetics grow best where? I mean, how many people are in this room researching hemp right now? Yeah, that's because we got a lot of challenges, right? And thank you all for being here and doing that. Whatever you're researching are the things that we need to overcome. I don't have a list long enough to encompass those, but it takes people like people in this room. It takes farmers out there being willing to give this a shot. It takes processors out there willing to put dollars into an industry that is yet to support itself to make all of this happen. So I already mentioned we got approved in AFCO, very exciting stuff. Why do we need the HFC? Real quick, we've bridged the regulatory gap. We have a good relationship with the FDA. We understand how to navigate this and get an application through probably more efficiently at this point than anyone else. We made all the mistakes the first time. Proven science-based leadership. We're science focused. That's what we're doing. We're supplying the data that supports why we should feed these animals. It's not an emotional argument. It's a scientific argument. We are innovative in terms of how we actually develop some of the testing methodology that is used for the FDA. Expanding applications, we're constantly looking for these offtake opportunities, trying to connect the dots, trying to connect people working in the industry. And we're advocates. We were in Washington, D.C. last week, advocating on behalf of farmers. Hemp is an animal feed ingredient. Industrial hemp has a different regulated crop than floral hemp. We're out there trying to make things happen. We would appreciate any support that anybody has to give the Hemp Feed Coalition. We're all volunteers. I paid to show up here I pay to go to most of my own events, to support the Hemp Feed Coalition. All of our dollars go directly into, the application process. So if you give to the Hemp Feed Coalition, we can guarantee that, we're gonna use that money to help legalize hemp as animal feed and breeding. Thank you.
To make a presentation, and I will turn it over to Raj.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Smart. Hey, good morning, everyone. I'm Raj Kasula, and I'm an employee with the Wenger Group. We are a leading animal agriculture business in the Mid-Atlantic, and I'm part of the Hemp Feed Coalition. And I thank Andrew for teeing up my presentation and also teasing some of the slides there. So that's going to probably make my life easier. I'm going to be summarizing a very large study that we used as a basis for the ingredient approval for laying hens. And I'm going to do my best to do it in 20 slides and given 20 minutes. So I'm going to be really crisp, and please feel free to ask questions, or I can share this presentation and also all the published papers. This study was published as 5 different papers in scientific journals. So please bear with me if I'm a bit fast. So this is what I'm going to share, like, what all we had to do to convince the FDA for the federal approval of the ingredient. And we are here today with the approval and official. It took almost, I know Andrew said it took about 3 years, but actually it took more than 3 years, including, if you include the research time, it was about 4.5 years. So that was a hell long journey, but we are happy. I feel really privileged and proud to be part of this revolution, which I'm sure is going to change a lot of dynamics in the animal feed industry. So let me start, like, before even let me give an intro to how I even landed with the hemp seed cake. I used to be the chief nutrition officer for the organization earlier, and as a nutritionist, I was always looking for alternate ingredients to make keep the cost of the feed as low as possible. And in order to get in the process, I kind of lined down about 10 different qualities or characteristics that I would look for in an ideal feed ingredient for animals, and these are the ones. You can read these details. I can rush through them. It should have a decent nutrient profile, free from any anti-nutritional factors, especially the mycotoxins and contaminants like heavy metals and pesticides and stuff. Should be safe to feed to animals, up to about 30% inclusion level for all life stages. Should not have any palatability or acceptance issues. In terms of health and welfare, there should not be any objectionable residues in the produce or the organs and blood. Sourcing, handling, storage should be easy. Processing, the ingredient should be good with various types of processing of feed, like pelleting, extrusion as well. And I believe the availability and economics go together. Like the higher the availability of ingredients, the economics will be, the ingredient will be cheaper, will cost into the formulations easier, and of course has to have a regulatory status approval, federal approval from the regulatory authorities. So this is how we started, and then we collaborated with the FDA. They helped us, with some inputs on how to even do a study that would convince them for approval. So with this background, I'm going to start with the nutrition profile. Of course, nutrition profile of the ingredient. You can see, I won't go through the entire details. On the face of it, you can see it is a decent source of protein and fat. It's a 9% fat. It's only because it is mechanically expelled as of today. And it has got a decent mineral profile, very good amino acid profile with arginine, lysine, and methionine, and a great fatty acid profile. I'll cover in the next slides. If you look at the, and then if we come, Andrew did this, introduce this slide, pitched this one, and I'm going to do a bit of comparison here with the most commonly used feed ingredients in the animal feed industry. which is soybean meal, canola meal, sunflower meal, and distillers grains. If you look at in terms of protein, hemp seed cake compares well with canola meal, definitely better than sunflower and distillers grains, but nowhere near soybean meal. And that's why soybean meal continues to rule the roost today. In terms of fat, hemp seed cake, the way it is approved, will have higher levels of fat. So it has got, it is much higher. It is higher. It is the best in the category today. It has got high levels of fiber. It is not a negative in total. That's the reason why it is not highlighted as red, but as orange. And it is beneficial in some species and not so much in the other species. So that is how I would rate the ingredient. And the boxes highlighted in yellow or in between, like the green is the best and highest in that line item parameter, line parameter or line item. Red is the lowest among the comparables, and yellow is in between. And orange is only because although it is not the best, but still beneficial depending on the context, species context. So this is in general about its comparison with the other feed ingredients. And if you look at the amino acid profile, you'll see hemp seed cake has very high levels of arginine, which is like one of the most required amino acids for building meat, and it is at its levels in lysine at 1.13% and methionine at 0.5%, which are like the key amino acids. It is a very decent. It's a very good amino acid profile. And even the other amino acid profiles or amino acid levels are comparable or better than some of the ingredients that are being compared here. If you look at the fatty acids, I think this is where the hemp seed cake stands out, especially because of its omega-3 fatty acids and the monounsaturated, polyunsaturated fatty acids, which I'll cover in the next slides. So there's also one more thing I need to highlight here is that the ratio of omega 6 to 3, which I'll highlight in the next slide also, please bear with me. In terms of contaminants, we studied the mycotoxins, heavy metals, and also the cannabinoids and THC. You can see from here, the numbers, they are way below, well within the regulated and actionable levels of mycotoxins as well as the heavy metals. And you can also see the cannabinoids and THC levels at the bottommost line at less than 0.005%. So this shows this is the ingredient safe from the contamination point of view. So that is about the ingredient. Now, about the feeding safety of the ingredients. FDA wanted a comprehensive set of data to demonstrate that the ingredient is safe to feed to animals. And we were doing that in laying hens. And this was a study we did in a commercial form, but with a research setup, creating a required number of replicates for statistical analysis. And we fed 4 groups of chickens. One group was kept at as a control with no hemp seed cake fed, and 3 groups were fed at 10%, 20%, 30% inclusion levels respectively, and they were compared. And 30% was the highest levels that we needed to demonstrate to FDA. So this, as I mentioned, is a very large study. We published at 5 different articles, and anyone needing more details, please let me know. So in any livestock, the first indication of safety of ingredient is the general performance. And this being chicken, we use about 5-6 different general performance parameters like the feed intake, body weight, hen day production, eggs per hen housed, feed conversion, and livability. And you can see, other than there was a numerical difference in the body weight, which was actually favorable, but it was not statistically significant. the body weights, any of these parameters did not differ significantly with the control group at different levels of inclusion. So saying that this is the ingredient did not have any adverse effect on the general performance in the laying hens. And this being laying hens, egg quality matters. Egg quality is a key parameter, key requirement. So, and as you know, egg quality is done on two gross parameters, the external and internal quality parameters. Say external would be on egg weight, egg mass, egg shell strength, egg shell thickness, and internal quality would be in terms of how units, yolk pigmentation, lutein, fatty acids, and of course heavy metals and cannabinoids in this context. So if you other than external, like the egg mass and eggshell strength, which were numerically different and actually beneficial, you could see there were all the other internal parameters, internal quality parameters, they were favorably and statistically significant improvements with increasing levels of feeding hemp seed cake. So there was the hemp seed cake helped improve the internal, definitely improve the internal egg quality of internal quality of the eggs. Looking at the fatty acids, this is the this is a very interesting, very impressive factor contribution from the hemp seed cake is that it helped reduce the with the increasing levels of feeding hemp seed cake, the saturated fatty acids and monounsaturated fatty acid levels decreased, and the polyunsaturated fatty acids and omega-3 and 6 increased, which is the absolute beneficial thing that absolute positive thing you would like to, you can expect from any ingredient. And the most important thing is the omega-6 to 3 ratio. You can see that with increasing levels of feeding hemp seed cake, the omega-6 to 3 ratio was decreasing, which is the most preferred one. And there is tons of literature which says that the excuse me, the cardiovascular mortality rate, which is like the heart-related death rate, follows the omega-6 to 3 ratio. And there's data from Europe and USA. You can see the line diagram here. Europe and USA has the highest. Japan has among the lowest, and the Eskimos and people from Eskimos from Greenland, they have the lowest. And that line graph clearly shows the trend. And also have given some data from prehistorical dates you can refer this data anywhere on the Google, and you'll find tons of literature popping up on that. The most important thing here was the lutein content. As you all know, lutein has a significant role in eye health. When lutein is fed as a supplement, is consumed as a supplement in any species, it delays the macular degeneration of eye. So it has got significant value in human health and also in other species. And you can see this. This is very interesting that it is there is almost like a linear correlation here that with the increasing levels of hemp seed cake, the lutein content in eggs also increased. And this has been statistically significant at every level of feeding. Then we had to also demonstrate to FDA the safety in terms of no adverse impact on blood parameters like protein, blood cells, pH, gross and histopathology of key organs like liver, spleen, kidneys, and duodenum, and gut health environment in terms of villus height and the manure quality, minerals and moisture, and also the bone strength. So we studied all these parameters and in depth, and you can see that there was no difference, or even if it was not statistically significant. So again, talking about this ingredient has no adverse impact either on systemic or organs in terms of gross histopathology. Then the mineral metabolism is another area of concern because this is being fed at that high levels, and especially with high levels of fiber. So we studied this in detail as well. And so we use bones as our indicator, and you can see here we measured the fresh weight of the bones, dry weight, the moisture content, the bone breaking strength, and ash in terms of mass as well as the percentage. And you can see there was no significant difference between the treated groups and the control in terms of the bone qualities. So this is a great indicator of the mineral metabolism, and that hemp seed cake is not affecting any adversely. Then comes the manure quality, because manure quality is indicator of the gut health as well. So we did an extensive study here, measured the nitrogen content, the full battery of minerals, moisture and total solids. And you can see here, except for some minor noise here and there, there was no significant difference. None of these was statistically significant. So this was this is an indicator that it has got no adverse effect on the gut health environment, or gut health environment as reflected in terms of the manure quality. The next few slides are going to be on the cannabinoid levels, because this ingredient belongs to the hemp family. The FDA had concerns about cannabinoid residues, and they wanted this to be a serious, a significant part of the safety study. So we did this. We did cannabinoid residue assays on blood, body tissues, and also the produce, which is eggs. And here is the cannabinoid residue profile in eggs. We did about 18 cannabinoids in total, and this particular slide captures only a few of those. And also we had to kind of develop these methods from the scratch, because none of those existed at that point of time when we were doing this research. And you can see at that point of time, the detectable level by any of the lab methods was 0.0025%. And we did not see any of these we did not find any of these cannabinoids in the egg as residues. In the blood, we measured the cannabinoid residues at week 8 and week 16, 2 different intervals. And you can see this is about 12, 13 of these we have presented here. All the cannabinoids, including the total THC and total cannabinoids, were less than 0.0025%, which is almost like none. And this is about the abdominal fat. And here is the same. We did not find the levels of, we could not even detect the levels with the methods that were available. And they were less than 0.0025%. Similar was the situation with the organs, liver, kidney, and spleen. Nowhere we could detect any of the individual cannabinoids, or the THC, or the total THC, or total cannabinoids. This is, and as Andrew mentioned, and as everyone knows, the grain doesn't contribute to THC or cannabinoids. It is the contamination that might come from the other parts of the plant. So this is pretty evident from whatever we have demonstrated through the studies here. And so with that background, we as a very large feed manufacturer, we were convinced about this as a valuable ingredient. And the same data, when we presented to the FDA for the ingredient approval, it went through, of course, after a very long and arduous process. The nutrient profile, it has got a great nutrition profile, especially the fatty acid profile and the lutein. No heavy metals or cannabinoids or mycotoxins of concern. Safety we did a very thorough study on that. We did not see any palatability issues during our study, and the residues also, you have seen the data. We were able, for the trial purposes, we did not have any issues with sourcing, handling. We did not, the ingredient was very good with handling and storage. And at the time, the reason why the processing is yellow because we use this ingredient only in the mash feed for the study. It needs to be tested in pelleting and extrusion. And I don't, based on the profile of the ingredient, based on my experience, I wouldn't see any issues with this ingredient being pelleted and extruded. As I mentioned earlier, like availability and economics will go together. And also with the regulatory status, at that point of time, it was not approved. But now with the approval, I'm expecting the ingredient will be produced in abundance, and is going to bring down make the ingredient more economical to be used in animal feed production. And Andrew presented excellent data on how this ingredient would be economical and how and why this would make sense for the producers to consider. And he also demonstrated some of the producers moving away from soybean production. So these are all very positive signs. And I'm very proud, and I'm very happy to say that I've had this opportunity to be part of this revolution that's going to take this animal feed industry by a storm very soon. So with this unique fatty acid, pigment, amino acids, and all these, I think I believe this is a very strong contender for animal as a animal feed ingredient, and can significantly replace the conventionally used animal feed ingredients. So this is all I have, and I hope I'm not rushed too fast, but I'm more than happy to take additional comments or questions.
Yeah, thank you very much, Raj.
My pleasure, sir. And so I thank Dr. Larry Schmitt and the whole team group for giving me this opportunity to present this again. I'm excited about talking about the hemp seed cake as animal feed ingredient. So, and please bear with me that I'm actually on my way to airport in another hour and a half for an overseas trip. So I still did not want to miss this opportunity. So please bear with me if I'm leaving. I'll be able to take calls or questions now, or even on the email subsequently.
Yeah, I think we're running a few minutes behind, so I appreciate that you'll make yourself available offline for any questions people have. Thanks again, Raj.
Thank you, sir. Bye-bye.
Okay. It's my great pleasure to introduce the first of our three colleagues from the Department of Animal Science in Ithaca at Cornell, Nathalie Trottier.
Okay, so thank you for having me come here today and tell you a little bit about what we've been working on at Cornell with horses. We've done a little bit of field work too, some pilot studies. But today I'm going to focus on horses. We don't have a whole lot of data just because we're just beginning to work with hemp seed meal and horses. But it's a very promising feed ingredient, in my opinion, for horses. So how many of you have horses? Not everybody is in the audience. I can see that for still great. But of people in here, how many of you are horse owners? Oh, that's okay. How many of you know a little bit about horses besides the fact that they can be scary sometimes? Okay, know a little bit about horses, right? You know a little bit about what they're eating, right? Eating how many hours a day they eat on pasture?
Most of it, yeah.
How many hours?
Most of it.
Most of it, right? You mean 18 hours a day, more or less, right? So, what does it mean? It means that they require a lot of forage. Right? They're all herbivores. So they need a lot of NDF, neutral divergent fiber, right? The stuff that you find in the sunflower oil, right? And there's a lot of it in hemp seed meal. So the 200 presentations were great because I did not have, and decided not to put a bunch of tables of nutrient composition, I just, just a little bit of it. But you know, it has a pretty nice amino acid profile. Not as nice as soybean meal, but close to linseed meal, which is an ingredient that is popular in horse concentrates. Okay. So there's a lot of potential, so let's talk about it. Right. So today we'll just talk very, very briefly, because we don't have a whole lot of time. But for you to make sense of the presentation in terms of why I think hemp seed meal is a really good potential feed ingredient for horses. We need to know a little bit about the nutrient recommendations for horses, just very briefly. Right? The nutrient composition of forages and grains and how the forages actually, look, their composition aligns a lot with hemp seed meal, which makes sense, right? When you get a concentrate for horses, it's that would be the place to actually include hemp seed meal in diets for horses, formulating concentrate. So what is a concentrate? Nutritional consideration and constraints for safe feed. Again, we're going to make a case for why hemp seed meal is a really attractive ingredient for horses, when we're talking about safe feeding for horses. Then a little bit about hemp seed meal potential feed ingredients for horses. So we'll look at approximate nutrient fiber composition of hemp seed meal, the carb composition. One study so far done on hemp seed meal palatability in horses, or Cornell pilot study, and then the plant studies that we have coming up here, beginning in October. Right, so as I mentioned, horses are obligate herbivores. They need plant matter, they need grasses, and they require this good stuff in the cell wall carbohydrates, which is called neutral detergent fibers. When we run the analysis and get NDF. So always hay forage first for horses, right? Cell wall carbohydrate. I'm really sorry, I'm struggling with this little microphone here, so I'm gonna get adjusted here soon. I hope. So cell wall carbohydrates intake reduces the risk of large intestinal dysfunctions in horses. So when we feed concentrate for horses, we always want to make sure that we're careful on the amount of starch from grains, because horses are not involved to consume grains, but nonetheless, we have to sometimes give them additional feed in addition to their hay or pasture for all kinds of different reasons. So starch and also water soluble carbohydrates that you're going to find in very immature plants, but starch that you're going to find in grains, these are rapidly fermented in large intestine. So what happens is that those carbs, they go very quickly through the GI tract, end up in the large intestine of the horse, and then you have lots of bugs in there, right? So they have a party, they have a cocktail, and ferment all the stuff, and then people, the horse gets sick. Very involved, the gases and lactic acid. Okay. So horses, very large. Voluminous large intestine takes about 65% of their entire GI tract. You can imagine how big it is. So we want to have low starch and low amount of water soluble carbohydrate. We want to have lots of neutral detergent fiber, minimum of 40%. When you get to 60%, then if it's a working horse, we want to do the extra energy. We also look for acid detergent fiber, and they're 8 to 10% in protein. So horses tend to have low need for protein and on the concentration basis, right? Working horses, certain horses will need more protein. So you want to give them a ration balancer or a concentrate that have higher proteins in there. Bingo, can't see milk, right? 20% protein. Additional fat desired for palatability and energy. Again, hemp seed meal resemble rice bran, which rice bran is a very common ingredient in horses concentrate, because rice brans contain about 10 to 12% fat and force fibers. So if you're looking at, it's probably nothing new to many of you here, but just to kind of set the tone again, looking at the forage, common forages that are fed horses, looking at the starch content, protein, this is percentage on a dry matter basis. So very low on the starch, right? Which is what we want. And then IND Hemp. Again, protein tends to be relatively low, except for alfalfa, which we call it cow cake. Because we don't really need to feed that to horses per se, although we do use it to some extent. Right? So lots of MDF. And then we're looking at cereal grains. What do we see here? Low MDF, much lower MDF, right? Except barley and oats. Oats being the preferred grain for horses because of higher MDF, right? Whole oats, I should say. And then very high starch content. Yeah. So when to feed a concentrate? Always hay first. Then a concentrate. It's composed of all kinds of different things. So we're gonna have grains in there, cereal grains. We're gonna have some soybean meal, oil, molasses, linseed meal. How about hemp meal instead? Right, so we feed a concentrate working horses, low availability of forage, so you're gonna tend to have maybe a concentrate that has lots of NDF in it. Aging horses don't have a whole lot of teeth left, so you gotta start maybe thinking about pelleting. Timothy hay, and this is where it would be really nice to be able to pellet Timothy with hemp seed meal together. Okay. That would be great pellets for horses, or just straight Timothy, straight hemp seed meal pellets. So consideration in grains and safe feeding of horses. Again, we want to limit starch intake to 2 to 4 grams per kilogram body weight as a general practice. But we have a lot of high risk horses out there. We have horses that really interest in starch. So if you have a concentrate that contains 45% starch in it, and the horse weighs 400 kilograms, then you're going to feed about no more than 1 kilogram of that concentrate if you want to be safe. And if the concentrate contains 60% starch, then you have to decrease the amount of concentrate. Right, so if you can have a low starch concentrate with a high fat content, that's the ideal, with lots of NDF. So that's what that hemp seed meal is a very attractive ingredient for that reason. So hemp seed meal, potential feeding ingredient for horses. We're looking at the approximate and fiber composition of hemp seed meal and common horse feeds. Looking at hemp seed meal right here, soybean meal, bean pulp, super popular, rice bran, very popular. This is a typical commercial concentrate. I just picked one. And here, you're looking at the composition here, the approximate here, for example, crude protein, crude fat, ash. So we're more interested here in crude protein, to approximate, and crude fat. Again, soybean meal, you don't really need a whole lot of soybean meal in a concentrate because it's so high in protein. Okay. So, and then again, looking at NDF, very low NDF in soybean meal. Rice bread, in this here we see, well, this rice bread has a lot more fat than some typical book values. But then again, rice bread is a very attractive ingredient because of its high fat content. Now, looking at a typical concentrate here, you see how much NDF we have in here. Amount of protein, fat. And so this comes from basically mixing a little bit of soybean meal, a little bit of wheat pulp, some rice bread, etc. together. So this concentrate here doesn't have hemp seed meal. It will have quite a bit of wheat pulp to bring up the NDF and probably some Timothy hay in there as well. Looking again at hemp seed meal, soybean meal, wheat pulp, rice bran, look at the amount of starch in there. Soybean meal, of course, is very low, and beet pulp is very low. That's why lots of horse owners like to utilize commercial concentrates that contain beet pulp in there. Again, the fact that hemp seed meal, because it's a meal, right? It makes sense that it will have very low amount of starch, yet, as well as very low amount of non-structural carbohydrates, which is what we find is basically inside the cell wall, inside the plant, the seed, I'm sorry. So basically outside of the cell wall, and low amount of simple sugars and water soluble carbohydrate. So again, I'm showing this to demonstrate that this is actually potentially a very safe ingredient for horses. Low starch, low water soluble carbohydrate, high amount of proteins, decent amount of fat, good amino acid profile. What else do you want? So this is the only study so far that I could find looking at the acceptance that has been actually published, peer-reviewed acceptance of hemp seed meal in horses. So what they did here is that they did a 6 days of repeated offering of 1 kilogram of hemp seed meal. Right, so starting day 1, hemp seed meal pellets compared to Bermuda grass. And you can see that over time, at first, the horses are going, what the heck, right? They need some adaptation. And then it's like, oh, maybe that's not so bad. Maybe I'm starting to prefer that to Bermuda grass. Oh, I'm going to keep on increasing this intake. And eventually, they say, well, you know, I prefer that stuff, right? So it's very well accepted by horses based on this one study. So we need more, right? We can't just, you know, make all these conclusions and promote hemp seed meal for horses without the data. So here again, if you look at hemp seed meal pellets versus beet pulp pellets, soybean meal and rice bran pellets, they prefer basically relatively rapid consumes of hemp seed meal pellets over beet pulp, over soybean meal, and similar to rice bran pellets. They like it. Okay. Also received a bag of ProBite from KTM, and they really like it too. My horses do, right? So again, we look at, it's pretty convincing, pretty nice set of data. So we did a small pilot study last year at Cornell, where we offered orchard grass veggie hay mix at 1% of their horses' body weight. And then we formulated concentrate, so we're having hemp seed meal and soybean meal kind of changing. I'll show you the diets, and we have 4 different concentrates that we offered with the hay. 0, 10, 20, and 40% hemp seed meal, and they were fed at 0.4% of their body weight. So the hay to concentrate ratio was 70-30 across them. So the diets were formulated as such. Here we have oats, soybean meal decreasing down to 2.3% of the diet by the time we had the 40% inclusion rate of soybean meal. So hemp seed meal here increasing from 0 to 40. Timothy hay pellets was kept constant, as well as corn, and we added oil to help with homogeneity and binding growing together. Right. So we're decreasing the oats, decreasing soybean meal, increasing hemp seed meal. So we try to maintain those diets as close as possible in protein content. And of course, the NDF increase, although we have a little bit of issues here with the analytical results, because the calculated result really shows us that we have over 35% NDF in the 40% hemp seed meal diet. So we're trying to figure out this part here. But nonetheless, high fiber concentrate, low starch, and 20% protein. And what we did here is actually we got those bags that are actually manufactured by some Amish community. And insert singles, so we fitted those in your bags to do fecal collections of these horses. And so we basically have color-coded bags. So we know how much diets is color-coded, and we basically offered each horse that had one of the concentrates through a collection period, and then we switched, so they all changed the diets for another period, and so for 4 different times. So it's called 4x4 laps for this time. So we rotate those diets. And then we collect fecal on that. And the reason we do that is because we don't want to collect from the floor, because it can be contaminated with urine. Or sawdust, right? So, or any kind of beddings that we have. So what we found is that we had no refusal of any concentrate. So it was more like an acceptability trial, not a palatability trial. We had no refusal, but all the horses ate lick clean, from 0% to 40% of their concentrate. They just ate everything, nothing was refused. They really enjoyed all of their diets. They consume on average 0.87 kilogram of instant meal every day. Starch intake, so if you look at the control diet, those horses were consuming 1.4 kilogram per gram of starch per kilogram body weight. But at the 40% MC meal, 0.9 or 0.89 grams per kilogram body weight. So we have a significant decrease in starch intake with those concentrates. Fecal score was normal. So we had also a chart from 1 to 10, or very dry horses have constipation, so forth, to cow patties, right? Or splattering on the wall, right? So very normal feces that were very important. We also did pH, I'm not showing those data. And also no difference in food protein digestibility. So basically those fecal collections allow us to figure out how digestible this MC milk is to horses. So we focus on protein for this study. So far, MC meal palatability in horses does not differ from that of rice bran. Is superior to other common feeds used to formulate concentrates. We also call them that bran balances. Concentrates formulated with MC meal and an inclusion rate of up to 40% are nutritionally complete and palatable. We have adequate lysine and protein for horses. Low starch, moderate high in fat, and high in NTF. Right. I just wanted to briefly take a couple more minutes, if I may, Jerry.
Quickly.
Quickly, okay. Just to tell you a little bit of what's coming up here. We have one study coming up, phase 1, where we're going to evaluate the tolerance, identify. Oh, I'm sorry. This is actually. Oops. The objective here is actually to determine how digestible MC milk is with a much larger number of animals. It's going to start very soon here, October. It's going to last through December. We're going to be using 8 mature gillies. We're going to do 2 repeated 4x4 squares. We're going to be feeding grass hay and concentrate, but this time we're going to go to 60% MC milk. And we're going to do total fecal collections this time, so 24 hours around, 4 days in a row. And so basically those horses are going to be adapted for 6 days, longer adaptation period than in our pilot study, and 4 days of total fecal collection. So a lot more thorough, a lot more horses as well. And then the phase 2 is going to start in May through August 2026. And this is a 12-week feeding trial with 18 horses. We're going to be using 3 diets in this one. And basically here we want to evaluate the tolerance and identify the potential health risks. So we need to do that. So we'll be doing bi-weekly body weight and body condition scoring on the horses. We're going to be doing blood chemistry, measuring liver enzymes and doing complete blood count. And looking at, we have to, making sure that, or any residues of cannabinoids, in the blood, because the racing horse industry, would be worried about that. All these horses are like, feeling really good, they're gonna run faster, right? They're not, but we gotta show that, right? So expected outcomes, our first control evaluation of head CBD legislative safety horses. Basically it's being done at Cornell. We want to see that, confirm that it's suitable and beautiful horses eating low starch diets. The results are going to be filling a critical knowledge gap. And it's going to provide data for future feeding of meat and food. I don't know if we have time for questions already, but.
Right. Thanks very much, Natalie.
Good morning. All right. Hey, I want to start just a couple quick things. One, a huge shout out to Larry, because all the animal work here at Cornell that Natalie's going to do and Shingen's been doing and we're going to do is really, we have to thank him because he really helped us navigate all the food for our Foundation for Food and Agricultural Research, FFAR, funding for hemp, as well as the required match from the New York State Hemp Funds. And so none of this would happen without Larry's efforts. So thank you very much for all that. Okay. Secondly, I will bet money that I know less about hemp and hemp production, hemp processing than anybody in the room. Okay. But I do know a little bit about feeding cows, right? So to talk about this, there's been very little work done in the whole hemp feeding and dairy. A couple challenges with what has been done. A lot of these are pretty small scale studies, right? And they also are using different materials, right? I've only captured a couple different studies here, but this one's done, this was actually more recently published here. They were using a dehulled hemp seed meal, about 50% protein, right? So high protein type feed here versus that 30% that we've been kind of seeing, presented here. In this study, they used to replace canola meal. That makes sense based on what people were talking about. Again, high protein feed, replacing high protein feed. And they did it based at 7.5% and 15% diet dry matter. No effects on intake, milk yield, milk composition. They did not detect cannabinoids in urine, milk, or plasma. Okay. Another study here, this was done out of Oregon State, and they used spent hemp biomass. Probably some of you know what that is. I really don't. Okay. But it's about 19% protein. They used to replace alfalfa pellet at 13% diet dry matter in jerseys, and the decreased dry matter intake and milk fat percentage. Milk yield was not expected, it was not affected. So, that to me suggests probably a pretty crude product overall, right? Unrefined product, and et cetera. So we're going to try to do better. So our objectives here are to determine the effects of dietary inclusion of hemp seed meal on cow performance and concentrations of these things in milk. Okay, so our plan is 60 Holstein cows at the Cornell Dairy Research Center, which is, I've got to run to there like right after this because I got to meet a group for a tour. Between 40 and 90 days after calving, and again, we'll get individual feed intakes on these cows. 2-week pre-treatment period to collect baseline data, and then treatments for 16 weeks, a control, basically a typical standard control diet, a total mixed ration. And then hemp seed meal at about 6% of diet dry matter. That to me, based on what it might replace in the diet, is probably where most inclusion rates might run from a practical standpoint. And then we're going to double it, right? So we're going to go, we're going to go where typical would be, and then we're going to go high just to make sure we're not seeing anything, seeing negatives there with high inclusion rates, things like that. And again, hemp seed meal will replace all or part of protein meals and then some other byproduct feeds. We feed lots of byproduct feeds in diets for cows. This is my last slide. I'm doing my best to get us a couple minutes back, Larry. So daily milk yield and dry matter intake, again, pretty standard production study. Weekly milk composition, so milk fat, milk protein, lactose, solids, somatic cell count. That's a standard indicator of mastitis or udder health. And milk urea nitrogen, those would be very standard milk composition profiles. We'll also get profiles of the milk fatty acids, right? That's something that's kind of a newer thing out there, but it'll tell us a little more about what's going on, maybe if there's anything going on in the rumen and things like that with these sources. We'll get rumination data by wearable sensors, right? So think Fitbits for cows. They're actually very widely adopted out there also on dairy farms. So it's not just a research thing, right? So it tells us something about, again, how the cow is doing, weights and condition scores, and then we do blood, additional milk, and then at least on the docket right now would be muscle by biopsy, and again, looking for residues of any sort. So that's kind of where we're at. I will say, again, I do have to run, but I'm pretty easy to find online, TRO2, and I'd be happy, again, our target for this is early 2026. So we have time to make adjustments, right? To tweak. If you see something, hey, you should be looking at this, thinking about this. So whether it's folks here or folks online, be happy to take any feedback that you have. So thank you.
So now we're going to move on, and I think Morgan is going to help sort of wrap up these different. There you go. You're on the screen now, Morgan. So hopefully she'll be able to sort of tie some of these things together, talk about some of the innovative things that are going on at IND Hemp and what she sees as the market potential in the future for this. And again, we all need to thank Morgan for all of her time and effort volunteering for the Hemp Feed Coalition. So thank you for that. Morgan, take it away.
Well, thanks, Larry. And I echo Tom's sentiment. Really appreciative of you, Larry, and all that you've done for both the industry and then helping coordinate and get these studies going. Nothing makes me happier to see things going on in the feed space. And I love that there's such enthusiasm about this. So great to hear those presentations. Thanks. I will be quick. I know you guys are behind, but let me just make sure I've got somehow. So I just have a few slides here today. Really appreciate the opportunity to talk about grain. This, albeit, is a fiber field. It's not the right picture, but I think it's a little comical here and a good place to start. But Larry asked me to chat about how to get a grain supply chain connected. So we'll go through all the things we did wrong, maybe, and then hopefully someone can do it the right way. But just kind of the basics is, if I look at the supply chain, it starts sort of with growers, genetics, harvest and handling, seed cleaning, processing, certification, and markets. If you guys don't know who I am or our company, I'm the CEO and co-founder of IND Hemp. We are a North Central Montana located grain fiber processor. And the little map you see below, the 2 stars are our locations. We have one in Fort Benton, which is all of our manufacturing. And then we have our offices and warehouse in Belgrade in south of Montana. Then all the little dots are sort of the network of growers we've worked with. We've been growing hemp since 2019 and have managed probably close to 40,000 acres since then. Almost a little less than half of that has been organic. Hemp has, for us, has always been a mission to add value to the farm and to create, rural economies, job development. We wanted a rotation crop to add value to the growers that were around our region, and grain actually is where we started. And so I always love to talk about grain and really hope that there's a bright future for it. I think that, some of the stuff you guys are here today to learn about probably shows that promise is still alive and well. So also, full transparency, we sort of tackled our business plan sort of in the layout that I have here, right? We started with growers, then identified genetics, then we sort of decided we try to tackle harvest and handling, seed cleaning, processing, certification, and markets. Hindsight, I would recommend that you would probably go in the reverse order for your business model and start with your markets where you're trying to sell into, what you're best positioned for, what certifications you need to service those markets, what processing and seed cleaning, and sort of work your way backwards. The reality is America has a really great network of farmers. It's the backbone of our industry and our country, really. And so I don't want to belittle their role by any means, but I think that they're there, and if you have a good plan and you have a good crop, they will be open to receiving and talking to you about it. I don't think that it's as hard to get growers to grow hemp as we originally thought it might be. And so that's sort of just hindsight 2020, how I wish we would have done things a little differently. But for the sake of this presentation, we'll continue to the path that we did. So as far as genetics, we're always looking for genetics that work best in our region and best for our markets. So again, trying to work backwards, we definitely do have some customers that have a flavor profile preference, and we do recognize that there is a spectrum of flavor profiles depending on the variety. We also see that there's some affinity to like soil type and other things that we probably play a role in that as well. The reality is the industry is not mature enough to really speak to that really well right now, but I see that as being something we should be thinking forward of and trying to match our markets in our region as well. So by and large, our genetic selection is on yield, harvestability, pest resistance, drought resistance. Those are sort of the biggest markers that we look for. We've got about 100 acres just outside of town that we work with. It's sort of on a lease agreement with a grower that we always do R&D on. So we try to take big scale production and do bite-sized pieces of 10 to 20 acres at a time. I really don't like advocating for genetics for our growers that we haven't seen at any sort of scale like that. So this year we had a total of 9 different varieties that we were testing. 6 of them were for grain. We're getting really good feedback both in the field, and then we're actually harvesting them, bringing them in right away and running them through our presses and through our dehulling equipment to get yields and start assessing some of those flavor profiles as well. Harvest and handling is also something that, definitely should be front of mind when you're looking at production across the US. There's different operations and different farm practices that are definitely diverse across the states. And so I think having a handle on that of what is already adopted in your region is pretty important. We're fortunate here in Montana that on-site grain storage is not unfamiliar to my growers. And a lot of them do have air handling and drying capabilities. We're also in a pretty arid region, and so we don't have to fight relatively high humidity. Usually we can either dry it down in the swath and then pick it up with combine, or we can straight cut it and put it in a bin at, let's say 15% moisture and get it down to below 10% within a month or so. It's really important. Like other oil seeds, it is a little volatile and it does like to to mold if you'll let it. You see the picture here of the grain head, like there's a lot of green material there with it. The combine definitely can get a lot of that out, but there's inherently still immature seeds and other green matter that is going to be a ripe environment for mold and other foreign material to sort of grow there. So that's important to make sure you have a good harvest and handling program in place when we talk about the supply chain. We don't have access to large storage, right? We can't go to the local elevator or the local seed cleaner or the local dryer. As businesses, we kind of have to have that infrastructure in place. I would love to think that as our industry grows, that larger scale infrastructure does come with it. But it's going to come at a cost. And so I think as an industry, we have to decide, which way we want to go, because when you do go to larger infrastructure, you lose lot traceability, things like that. So when we talk about the opportunity for the farm story, right, to go into packaging, where the farm was, where that seed was harvested, you lose that if you go to large scale infrastructure. Carbon credits is another thing that I think we'll need to be cautious of. Grain may not be as much of a player there, but fiber definitely is. And so if you can't trace the lot back, it loses that visibility into the carbon market that I think a lot of those buyers, are looking for. So something to consider as we look at the supply chain at large is how we want to grow and if we want to do something different than just the standard grain infrastructure that's in place elsewhere. And feel free to ask questions in the middle. I obviously can't see necessarily, but I'll try to get through these slides pretty quick so that we have plenty of time for questions. Next on the list is sort of seed cleaning, processing, and certifications. We have completely redone our seed cleaning facility since we started in 2019. The reality is what I fight here maybe not be similar in Iowa or Indiana or New York, but some of the seeds that we see, volunteer wheat is pretty predominant around here. We have other kochia and other weed seeds that we have to get out. So our first iteration of seed cleaning was okay, but it wasn't good enough. Now we're cleaning 99.9% cleanliness. We do leverage color sorters as sort of our final step. But it's been a learning experience. You know, there's not really a playbook out there for how to clean and process hemp. But I think we've got a pretty good handle of it now. Because it is an oil seed, you do have to be pretty careful and cautious of just every time you touch it. There's a likelihood that you could crack the seed. You start to oxidize. That's a big thing. Freshness of seed is another thing. Typically, if you can keep the grain clean and reduce the amount of cracked and hearts that are in the grain, you can probably keep grain for up to 2 years. You definitely start to see reduction in quality and freshness after that 2-year mark. We try to move through grain in 18 months or less is sort of our objective. We're also kind of favorable. We're in a pretty cold climate as well in the winter. So a lot of times when we have those, negative 30-degree spells, we'll turn on the fans in our bins and we'll freeze down our lots, and those bins will stay cold for quite a while. Knowing what certifications you want to go after is also a big deal. I sort of put up here today what we are running. We're really proud of our ability to say we're SQF certified. That was a big food standard that we had to overcome, but it communicates so much to our buyers that, we're really managing this at the highest level of quality. We have a quality assurance manager, we have technicians that help, and then our team really has bought into our food safety culture. That's really important. So processing is, right now fairly simple in terms of the technology. We're leveraging existing pieces of equipment. Canada, right, has been doing food for a bit longer than us, and they've got technology that they've leveraged that we can tap into. I have a couple slides just at the end here where I think we're going, but by and large, the equipment to leverage the grain supply chain is fairly straightforward and not as sophisticated as one might think. As far as markets, this is sort of like, the open-ended book. I just put on here, a CPG package we're considering to take hearts to market. It's the most widely known and accepted hemp ingredient in the market. I think we see the sophistication and further value-added processing definitely on the horizon. And like I said, I'll speak to that here shortly. But that's really what we need to do when we talk about how do we connect the supply chain. I really advocate for folks to understand their market and what they're trying to deliver first and foremost, and then work backwards from there. The feed industry, obviously, I'm a big proponent for it. I really do think it is the backbone of our industry's growth. But the reality is it's also the lowest value opportunity in a lot of ways. And so as we grow and we have to kind of endure these growing pains, we have to continue to reach for high valued markets. I would love to see the oil market continue to advance and some opportunities there sort of realized so that we can complement the interest we continue to see on the animal feed sector. I don't think any oilseed processor today is interested in crushing hemp seed for animal feed only. It's a byproduct by nature. We use the word co-product kind of loosely to sort of take the edge off the word byproduct, but the reality is oil is supposed to be sort of the higher value driving product, and the co-product and hemp seed meal is there to help complement it. And so if we can drive higher valued products in the animal sector because of nutritional opportunities or just market adoption, that's great. What it really means though is that just our oil can be priced more competitively, which we need anyways. So I didn't really put up here, but it is important to touch on is just like the farm economics and the business economics. We need to see increased yields at the farm gate so that we can reduce the commodity costs. Right now, it's very, it's cost prohibitive really at the point. Most processors right now are in this like super lean modality where we're just trying to reduce COGS. And one of the biggest levers available to us is the cost of the raw material. So, we're very farm focused and we've started this business to add value to the farm. So that's the last lever we technically want to pull, but it is a meaningful lever. And one thing to make that available to us to not feel like we're giving the farmers the short end of the stick is increasing the yield at the farm gate. So their revenue per acre doesn't necessarily change, even though the price per pound might be reduced. So where we might head for the future of hemp, I did this last summer for our summit. this is just my opinion. Don't like take it for it's the gospel. My background, I'm a chemical engineer and I worked for ADM for several years. And so I come from protein isolate and concentrate world. And so I guess I'm a little biased to seeing the potential. But I really do think like when we look at hemp grain as an opportunity, we have essentially two components that we get to promote. They're the fatty acids and they're the amino acids. And as we identified opportunities for fatty acids, that's mostly on the oil side and being able to leverage that. There's obviously some residual fatty acids in the protein as well, but that's not what we're predominantly marketing. What we're marketing is the amino acid profile. And so I think we'll see breeders and other more sophisticated technologies come online to really complement and elevate the amino acid profile that hemp naturally has. So we'll see that in concentrations or refined powders. We're going to see improved flavor and colored ability, the functionalities. This is definitely how we get into large CPG products. You know, I threw the picture up there of hemp hearts. That's what we know and use today, but really what's happening in the background are folks, you know, I talked about I have up here some of the existing converters today. Those are the folks that recognize that how do we get into labels behind every, you know, store shelf is getting this into its isolated or concentrated forms and then including it into recipes. So there's some potential here. I think a lot of folks are using hemp hearts versus the hemp seed as the feedstock. You remove that chlorophyll, that carbohydrate and that fiber, and are left with essentially the fat and the protein. I think we're looking at potential solvents or other technologies to remove the oil. That is almost exclusively a function of getting to the highest yield possible and removing as much of that fat as we can. You also see some specialized pumps or solution technologies that are separating out the protein. A lot of those proteins have to go through spray dryers to meet the finished product needs and specialized mills. So that's, you know, how do we get it to a form that dissolves in water or, you know, is, you know, stays suspended in a protein shake or something like that. So I put up here some examples of success that we see on market. I hope to see more of these come to market. IND Hemp's perspective, you know, we want to be one of the primary processors on the front side of the supply chain and complement these other more sophisticated folks in their growth of the market. But we feel a real calling and a need to stay hyper-focused on the front end to make sure that the farmers are doing what they need to do, that we're getting the most value at the farm gate, and then obviously producing as highest quality product as we can. Just sort of a roadmap of protein isolates is that sort of its own like direction. You see this in other commodities, so we don't have to reinvent the wheel. I would suggest we don't, but that's where you see plant-based proteins go. You know, the narrative of the day, you know, maybe plant-based protein doesn't have as good of a connotation to it as it did maybe a few years ago, but it's still very much a viable opportunity, right? And so I think that we see folks that are looking at hemp for the superfood that it is and hopefully continue to highlight the proteins that are naturally there. The competition's there. I personally don't think it's if they're going to get into hemp, it's when. And I think they're keeping a close eye on it. But they want to see some of these growing pains sort of level out. It starts with regulations, to be honest. I was in DC last week, and we still have a bit of a hurdle to overcome there. So I personally see that as an opportunity for small folks like myself to continue to find our niche and like our space, so that when the folks do come to play in the space, we have some value to propose and to hopefully still be standing. What we see as a challenge is we're going to have competitive pricing. That's, you know, there's no ifs, ands, buts about it. We really do need to figure that out. And I go back to, it starts first with getting more yield out of the farm so that we can reduce our commodity pricing. We're going to have to get to a commercial scale that's very capital intensive. So finding good partners that are patient and understand that. We have to have a balance of the co-products. So if, for example, a lot of the processing goes to hemp hearts as the preferred feedstock for these protein isolates, what are we going to do with all those hulls? Another great opportunity, I think, for the feed sector. And so we just really need to complement that supply chain growth, because if we're not looking forward to sort of that off balance of co-products, we're going to find ourselves in a pickle pretty quick. And then obviously consumer awareness and adoption. I think we have less conversations today of, hey, are these going to get me high? But we're still having them. And so I think we still need to work on consumer awareness and understanding the value proposition that hemp has in their diet, and other things. So I see challenges as opportunities also. So let's talk about those co-products again. Like if hulls are going to be the challenging for us, let's try to find the highest value opportunity possible. I know there's some folks doing some really good research out there. Everything from a dietary fiber that could also go into, a human consumption diet to other, biochar type feedstocks that potentially have more value in the carbon space. This hopefully fits into large scale farming. I think that if we see the industry grow, we have to find a way to just be a drop in into existing infrastructure and not make sure that we're advocating for something that has to be special because people want to adopt it. But hopefully then we also see specialized breeding programs come on. I know that there's a lot of good things happening. You guys are talking about here today. Larry's at the front end of that and understanding how can we learn from other commodities like canola or soy and sugar beets, and let's leverage sort of that growth that it doesn't take us 40 years to get to scale, but we can hopefully hyperspeed some of the growth as an industry. So that's all I have today. I know I didn't have a lot of time and I want to hopefully get you guys back on. But if there's questions, I'm happy to share.
All right. We have one more speaker who's going to, again, give us a more practical perspective on this question. And we're going to shuffle between two different PowerPoints here. So let me get those.
I'm glad all the smart people went first. My God. Holy smokes.
So Herb Grove of
So
Fresh Mountain Bison.
We're the farm end product users. There's a lot of science up there. Let's talk about it. The protein, the benefits. I mean, this plant's awesome.
Let me give you a mic.
Can everybody hear me okay if I use a mic or not?
Well, we want to record you.
Oh, biscuits. All right. So
That's good.
What started out for us as a hobby turned into a passion, has now become a mission to conquer this beast. Like, it's been brutal. We started in 2019 right out of the gate. We grew 150 acres.
Ready?
Go ahead. Sarah, what's it?
I'm on vacation every single day because I love my occupation. Hey, I'm on vacation. If you don't like your life, then you should go and change.
Like I said, it was fun. You know what I mean? Like, we wanted to get in this, learn what we could. It's definitely become a mission. We started in the bison industry in 2011, and we started raising hemp in 2019. 2011, we had 6 head of bison. At the end of last year, we had 300 animals on feed. We also feed beef now as well. So we have 2 different herds. We built our own trials barn. Penn State kind of helped us out a little bit. So we come in with a facility that we had control groups, non-control groups. So we kind of got our own information. These are just slides, pictures off the farms of some of the stuff we do. Really what it comes down to is protein, carbohydrates, and starch, right? So if we're raising these animals for feed, we want to build protein. How do you build protein? You feed protein, which goes to your hemp, which is phenomenal, right? So our base is corn silage. We run a TMR mix. So these animals consume about 3% of the body weight. So a 1,000-pound animal consumes 3%, which is 3%, which is 30 pounds per day. Of that 30 pounds, 10% would be our hemp ration. So we're feeding between 3 and 4 pounds of hemp meal to our corn silage along with our mineral packs. We'll feed hemp. We run canola, sunflowers. You've seen we grow a lot of oil seeds. We do different things as far as our feed program. The advantage to hemp is it is high in protein. We did the control group, and the cool thing about bison, to go back here, we harvest 65,000 bison every year in our country. We harvest 60,000 beef every day by noon. So that number is interesting because it's such a niche market, as is the hemp is as well. The biggest thing why bison, they don't marble like beef. They put the fat on the outside of the protein. So it's a cool animal to put on feed programs. They're awesome. They take it really well. Our weight gains is pretty consistent. We didn't really see an increase in weight gains by actually feeding the hemp, but what we did see is an increase in omega-6 it lowered the 5s and increased the omega-6s in the protein, and the 3s really didn't change. Our goal was that we could increase the omega-3s, and I think we could when we would harvest the plant itself and wrap it as a solid-based feed, but it's a lot easier in our program to actually use the meal. So at the end of the day, this crop's awesome. It brings a lot of benefits to the people. You've heard all the science before. It's the protein we're after. It's the ration. It's not a full mix. We've tried feeding it straight. We've tried using spent biomass, but we got it from an alcohol extraction facility. Did not work well because the alcohol. You know, we've tried all kinds of different things. So the thing that really worked for us with the hemp is just the meal. We also have facilities, their own press mill, so we press the seeds. We have access to some of that meal. The next step is the market for the oil. You know, we got to work as an industry building the oil market to get us to the next level. So, you know, this is one of our family farms that we have bison on now. It's been in the family since 1750. But so as you all know, it's an awesome plant. It's exciting to be part of this conference. I think it's the first conference they're talking about hemp as a seed. Like I said, we've been focused since 2019. Sarah Mitchell's an advocate. We buy our seeds to them for seeds we've been working with. And, you know, I think we do good at it. Our yields are phenomenal. We learned how to dry it, handle it. This thing's a beast, you know, and you're going to find out. I mean, everything about it. But as an industry, we're getting pretty close. And honestly, the government, if they get this thing split up, you know, between industrial CBD, they got to take the handcuffs off of us as a farmer. You know, it's really brutal for us. We're not, you know, in central Pennsylvania, they pick on us pretty hard because nobody's growing as much hemp. So I'm always dealing with the state and inspectors, and it's just been kind of brutal. So we're sticking with it. Hopefully next year, things are going to start to go the other way. And there's definitely a market already. The demand's there. So again, just a couple slides. We've taken animals to the national level. We had the second largest bull ever at Denver at the show. He was a hemp-raised bull. He was fed hemp his whole life. He went to the show and sale. So out of the entire country and Canada, you know, he was the second heaviest yearling bull at the show 2 years ago. So that's pretty cool. Other than that, it's just a positive thing. It's there, it's coming, and I hope it sticks around. Biggest things are any questions, farm-wise, animals?
Yeah,
Yeah, that's what I figured. So
we're pretty much back on. This one's not working.
take them off.
Yeah. Have any more questions for her? Yeah, thank you. If no.
No rush to lunch.
I just verbally had a few years experience now harvesting and growing. Andrew had 1,000 pounds an acre target and said, you know, a lot of people are getting 500. Did you start out at 500 and where are you at now as you?
So the last 2 years, we were successfully at 1,250 pounds per acre of clean hemp seed. You know, this stuff's really green coming off, you know, there's numbers out there, but in the bin at the human side, human consumable side, we averaged 1,250 pounds. I mean, our long-term goal is that 1,800 pound mark. And if we can get there clean dry, and this is the year to really get other farmers interested. I mean, corn's the lowest it's been since 1974. As you heard, beans are in the tank. You know, as a group, if we get this industry up and running, I think it's a good time for other farmers to step in. So it is there.
Okay, thank you very much. Great presentation. This might be a question for Larry. I don't expect the answer to her, but fruit protein per acre, analyzing hemp versus other high protein crops, alfalfa, soy, etc. I don't know where it ranks among those, but I'd like to take that analysis further and look at inputs relative to fruit protein output per acre. To your point that this is about protein.
Yeah, and the difference between alfalfa and seeds is we're actually concentrating that hemp protein, where alfalfa is not as digestive, so they're not going to want to eat as much volume as we can get to them to the hemp seed, the hemp meal.
Thank you.
All right, so
Again, thanks very much, Herb.
This has been a production of Cornell University, on the web at cornell.edu.